What is up, folks? Whoops. Let me clean this up for a second. I was like fixing a bunch of stuff, a bunch of things before I started going. Okay, so yesterday I posted the state reducer pattern with React hooks, which referenced an old blog post about a year old where I introduced the state reducer pattern as a new thing that Downshift started. And yeah, so I thought, hey, it'd be interesting to see what it would be like, what this pattern looks like now that we have hooks. And yeah, I gave a talk that kind of talks about the state reducer pattern in at React Rally, and it was pretty good talk. I feel pretty good about this one, so I recommend that you give this one a look. So yeah, here I just have a contrived example to show you how to use this, and I thought I'd just basically do a dev tip that is this blog post as a dev tip. So let's do that. So we've got this switch. We can go back and forth. We can switch it on, switch it off. It is contrived because because I don't see like I intentionally make contrived examples so that you can focus learning the thing rather than like what the example is doing. And then you can take that thing that you've learned and we can apply it to like a more legit example. But yeah, so like I don't see a situation where you'd really want to have a UI like this. Maybe you'd have a bunch of toggles and you say switch them all off or switch them all on. I could see that being useful, I guess. But yeah, so we've got this use toggle hook that has those three methods and then just returns that. And so the first thing that we're going to do is I want to say if you click on the toggle more than 4 times, then I'm not going to let you click on the toggle anymore. You can keep on clicking these, but the toggle, no touchy until you hit a reset button. So let me just copy this right here because I don't want to type all that out. So we're going to have a too many clicks. We're also going to have a handle click that is going to be our click handler, and it's going to call set click sense reset. And we're going to put those lines up here. So what we're doing now is we're saying we're going to keep track of how many times the switch is clicked. So every time it's clicked, we'll increment that count. And then we'll determine too many clicks as more than or equal to 4 clicks since the last reset. And so if there are too many clicks, then we'll render this button to allow you to reset that count. And if there are too many clicks, then we don't want the toggle to happen. So we can go that, but the toggle still happens because we don't have any logic around they're not allowed to click beyond that. And so like a really easy way to solve this problem, if this were the thing that we were building, is we'd say if too many clicks is greater than if too many clicks, and we'll say if not too many clicks, then we'll do that. And so that solves our problem actually. That works out perfect, and we can still switch on and off. But we're doing a contrived example, so we're not going to do it that way. We're going to implement a state reducer so that we can control how the toggle state gets updated. So in my blog post, I say, how about we have this modify state change option that we can pass to use toggle. And so let's just do that really quick. We're not going to actually implement this in use toggle yet. We'll do an API driven development approach here. So I'm going to say modify state change. And so anytime the state is changing, we want to modify how that state is changing. So basically we're going to say we don't want the on property to be set or to be toggled if the too many clicks is true. Okay, so this is going to need to take our state and maybe, what did I call it in here? Yeah, the changes that are about to happen to our state. So I'll say if there are too many clicks, then we'll return the original state. But like, let's say that there are some other changes that could happen. All that we really care about is the on state. So we'll leave that to the original state.on. Okay, so the on state can't change, but everything else is fine. Otherwise, we'll return the changes. So the changes are fine. So that works great, except if we were to implement this, this wouldn't quite work because then it would prevent people from using these buttons to switch on and off. So we need to differentiate between the different types of changes that are going to happen. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to call this, and we're actually going to say, hey, let's use a reducer instead. So we'll say reducer, kind of like a use reducer with React hooks. So that'll take a state and an action, and then our changes will be on the action. And then we can say the action, and the action.type is toggle. And then whoever's implementing this just needs to set the action.type to be toggle if we're toggling, or to be the switch on and switch off if the user clicked on those things. So just some mechanism for us to distinguish between these different types. Now, one other thing that I'm going to do is I don't like having these strings just lying around. It doesn't make for good autocomplete. Or discoverability. So what we'll do is I'll say use toggle.types.toggle. And then we just put all the different types in there. Cool. So with that, let's go ahead and see how we'd implement this. The first thing that I'm going to do is make this React use state. I'm going to change this to a reducer because that will really simplify things. Like, we could add some logic in here to call the reducer that we're getting from the user. Here, let's just pull that in right now, reducer. So this is the user's reducer. So we could get that really easily, that'd be fine, but I think it'd be even easier if we use React use reducer instead. So I'm going to make a function up here called toggle reducer. It's going to take my state and my action there. And then we'll do a switch statement here where that's action.type, and we'll have a toggle, or actually we'll stick with that for now. And for a toggle, we're going to return on is the opposite of state.on. And then, so we have a toggle, we have an on and an off. So I can't remember what I said in the blog post. Let's see really quick. What did I do? Yeah. So then we had a case for on. I like to do blocks for my cases because I feel like it's easier to make changes later. So return on is true, and then we'll have an off case where on is false. And then for the default case, I think it's always a good idea to throw a new error, unhandled type, action.type. Because if you're dispatching something and we don't have any code to handle it, that's probably a mistake. Okay, cool. So let's see. I feel like there was something else I wanted to do, but we'll get to that. So now we can just refactor this to use a reducer instead. So we're going to say use reducer. And now we're going to pass the toggle reducer. And then our state initializer is going to be an object with on is false. And then our state value is going to be an object where on is a property of that object. And then our set on state is going to be dispatch. And here we're going to dispatch a type of toggle. Here we'll dispatch a type of on, and we'll dispatch a type of off. So that's a straight up refactor. Everything should continue to work as it was before. Cool. Okay, so one thing that I'm going to do really quick is I'll say use toggle.type equals this object that we'll have different types. So we'll have toggle is toggle, and on is on, and off is off. And then here on all of these types, I'm going to just say use toggle type. Those need to be types. I did type, but we're going to do types. There we go. And then for each one of these cases, we'll do the same, use toggle types dot those. That makes it a little bit easier because now users can use it that way too. Discoverability and all of that stuff, which is great. Cool. Okay, so now we just need to apply the user's reducer. And the user's reducer needs to know what the changes are that are going to take place. And so that's going to be on the action object. And so what that means is we need to run our reducer first, and then we'll run the user's reducer with our reducer's changes. And the user can do whatever they want to with those changes. So let's take a look at that. What like the only place that I actually have this reducer is inside of the use toggle function. So I don't have access to that reducer inside of the toggle reducer. I could if I pass that to dispatch. That just feels like overkill. We'll make a new inline reducer right here. This is going to take our state and our action, and we're going to return, or actually, yeah, we'll just return toggle reducer with a state and action, and that's a straight up refactor. We haven't actually changed any behavior there. So what that's going to give us though is the changes that need to take place. And so instead we can call return reducer with the state, and we'll take all the properties from the action, and we'll also add the changes to that object. And that makes it work. Ta-da! Then we switch off, switch on, switch off, switch on, but we can't until we reset, and then we can. Sweet, right? Cool. So that is what, yeah, that's that. That's pretty much it for the state reducer pattern. Now, somebody actually mentioned, and by the way, if you have questions, go ahead and ask in the chat, because I'm going to, like, when I'm done, I'm going to look for questions, and if there are none, then I'm going to leave, and you're like 15 seconds behind me, so, like, feel free to ask questions. Yeah, somebody mentioned to me in the responses here on Twitter that he didn't agree with the API, and the reason was that it, like, let's say that somebody wanted to, well, like just in this case, we're doing work that's not necessary in the event that there are too many clicks and the user is firing a use toggle toggle type. So like it was totally useless to have our reducer run in that situation because we're just like changing the behavior. Now, I personally don't really care about that. Most of the time, your reducer should be a pretty simple, well, maybe not necessarily simple, but computationally inexpensive. I can't think of a situation where it would be computationally expensive because it should be a pure function, so you shouldn't be doing side effects. And the side effects are the things that typically will take take a bit of time. But sometimes like there could be some calculations you need to make in this reducer, and so you'd like to avoid unnecessary work. Yeah, so this is just another way to do it. That I told him I was going to update my blog post to do what he's suggesting, but I think I'm going to leave it the way that it is because I feel like what this provides is a really nice and straightforward API for people. But I'm going to just show you another way to accomplish this same thing. So really quick, Darwin just asks, there's a new version of Redux, version 7, that's using hooks. Are they using use reducer? I actually don't know. I don't know anything about Redux, really. I haven't used Redux in an app for like almost 3 years, maybe 2.5 years. And yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Redux personally, so I don't know. I'm guessing they are not using use reducer. They're probably just using use context and passing Redux in the Redux store into context as well as dispatch. That's my guess. Okay, sweet. So let's just go ahead and we'll implement Sebastian's suggestion anyway, and you can take a look and see what you prefer. So, before we get into that, one other thing. It is feasible that somebody could be using use toggle and not want to provide their own reducer, and that being the case, we're going to need to provide a default object so that they can call this without providing any arguments like that, because if we don't have a default object, then we're going to be in trouble. So we'll provide that default object, and then even if somebody does provide an object, they may not provide a reducer, so we'll add a default for this also. And this is going to take our state and our action, and our default reducer is just going to return the action.changes, so it'll do nothing, and that way people can use toggle and it'll work just fine if they don't provide a reducer. Okay, sweet. So I got another please update the use state versus use reducer right here. Please ping me on Twitter. I've gotten 3 of those. I should probably take the time to update that. Sorry. Okay, so now that we have that all squared away, let's go ahead and change our implementation a bit. Well, first we'll look at the way that this is going to be used. So if and actually, you know what? I'm gonna save this really quick, and I'll paste it in to. Whoops! I don't know what I even did. Okay. So anyway, you can go look at this as it was at this time. Now I'm gonna fork it, and I will copy this and we'll paste it here. So this is the new one. So like presumably this is going to be in a separate module, right? All this code will live in a separate module, and you will only export use toggle. With this new approach, you're going to also export the toggle reducer. And actually maybe what we'll do instead is I'll have use toggle dot default reducer is the toggle reducer, or maybe we'll just say, yeah, just default reducer is fine. And then instead of defaulting to well, actually, let's leave that as it is. I should probably, let's go with the usage case first. So with use toggle, I'm going to say, here's my reducer. But what Sebastian's suggestion is that as soon as somebody provides a reducer, theirs is the only reducer that runs. So they are responsible completely and entirely for state updates, which that sort of makes sense, but it means that the user has to do a little bit more to make things work properly. So what we're going to do is we are just gonna, like, since we're totally in charge of it, I'm just gonna say, okay, we only care about updating this state and for the too many clicks situation. So we kind of have to be cognizant of all of the state that is available. So for us, that's just on. For something like downshift, that would be, you'd have to handle is open, highlighted index, make sure that those change or do not change based off of what you're trying to accomplish for your situation. So the next thing here is now we don't want any changes to happen, but we don't have the changes object anymore. We just have the action itself. And so how do we get that changes object? We use toggle default reducer with the state and the action. And so now we're responsible for calling into the default reducer because we're overriding that reducer. So it's our responsibility to compose our reducer with a built-in reducer. So it's not a whole lot different from the user perspective, but it does mean that we have to, we don't have the changes available to us. So it's kind of just a different way to do it. So let's take a look at how we would accomplish this. First off, well, actually, it's pretty simple. We'll just get rid of all of this and pass reducer in there instead. And then instead of having the reducer default to one that just accepts the changes, we no longer have the changes. We're just going to default this to the toggle reducer. And now that gets us the behavior that we're looking for. We reset, and then boom, 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 boom. We're good. So it works exactly the same way, or we're able to accomplish the same task with both of these. It's just the way that we accomplish it is different. Where the first one, we did all the work inside of ourselves and then exposed that work that we did to the user's reducer. And in the second case, we rely on the user to update that. To be the default reducer, or to call the default reducer if they need to get those changes. So if we wanted to have those changes, by the way, we could say const changes equals that, and then return changes, and then we could just say changes. But the reason that this is maybe superior with regard to flexibility is I don't have to call the default reducer if nothing needs to happen. Like, for example, I could say, what I could do here is I just return the state, and that would prevent a re-render, which would be pretty cool. And then we would just do that calculation in here. So that's neat. And in fact, we can, let's take a look at that. We'll console.log re-render, and then we'll pop open our console. So, or we'll just call that render. So we get render, we click to render, click to render, click to render, click to render. And it looks like actually it is rendering every time. Oh, because we're still setting click since reset. So we'll say if too many clicks, just to demonstrate this. Not to say that this is how I would implement this, but just to demonstrate the re-renders. Oh, if not, whoops. Okay, boom, 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 boom. Yeah, so it's not re-rendering because we're returning the same state, so no state is being changed, so it doesn't need to re-render. So there's like a potential benefit there. It gives you a lot more flexibility to do it this way. So maybe I will update my blog post. If I'm encouraging people to use this pattern, I should probably show them the more flexible approach. Okay, so let me just check out the questions, and then I'm going to shut this off. So in the company I'm working right now, we're using context and use state for global local management. Do you have any other suggestions? We have one context for each entity, like modals and user data. So right now, I actually think that's a pretty good approach. I may not use state. I might use reducer. But yeah, so like think about it. I should probably do an update to application state management. Got to get rid of that from my history. That blog post doesn't exist anymore, and we'll get rid of that. This is where it is now. So I should probably do an update to this because yeah, this talks about context, but it doesn't talk about the new context API with use context. It talks about unstated, which is great, but I'm kind of leaning more toward some other solutions. Well, or at least I want to mention some other solutions. And it talks about Redux, where I mostly say don't use Redux, probably. And I need to remove some of this stuff because some of it's not relevant anymore. So I got to update that. But basically, I would probably, like if your user object never changed, like if you have some state that never changes throughout the lifetime of the application, what you have is not state, but you have data. And so data can just live in a singleton module that just allows you to get that state. And it also, this allows you to set that state as well. But yeah, I typically, if you need to set it, then it actually is state that needs to live over time. And if that's the case, then you're going to want to use state, like actual state with context or just local component state. So I do need to update that blog post. But yeah, so yeah, I'd probably just use reducer for things that do change. But if it's like a single state or state entity, like a theme, like light versus dark or something like that, then maybe that use state works fine. Doesn't really make a huge difference either way, because here we are using use toggle, and as far as we know, it could be use state. It doesn't matter to us as the consumer, but internally it's using use reducer, and it could use state too. No big deal. Okay. MobX versus Redux, which do you prefer? So I've never used MobX, but from what I've seen, it relies heavily on decorators and data or what's the word? Manipulation, I guess. I'm drawing a blank on the word that I'm trying to think of, but like where you say, state.foo equals bar, and it'll track that and it'll update, trigger a re-render. I really don't like triggering re-renders on assignment like this. I much prefer .set, which is why I definitely prefer using like just the built-in stuff like set state with classes and use state with the state updater. So I don't like MobX or Redux. I don't really use either one of them. I have used Redux. I've never mutation. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Mutation. I'm not a big fan of mutation as an API for state or for re-renders or state updates. And MobX seems to embrace that. This is one of the reasons that I'm not huge into Vue as well. So yeah, but there is one that has definitely caught my eye, XState. So I'm not sure about entire like application state management with XState, but I am pretty impressed by this concept. And so yeah, I think it's a pretty cool idea, something that I want to spend more time with. Another that I've heard of is Immer, but I haven't really looked into this much, but I think it's by the same guy who made MobX. But it sort of also has data manipulation as an API or a mutation as an API, and I'm not super into that still, so but people seem to like it pretty well. But I'm also not into decorators either. I feel like decorators are funny. Okay, sweet. So that's it for me. I probably will update this blog post to use this instead, because I think that's probably better. So look forward to that. And yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.